You ever have those days or maybe even weeks where you just feel like you're going through the motions? Kind of like the color has been turned down on everything. Well, let's get into that, because you are definitely not the only one feeling this way. Today, we're going to explore why we sometimes feel completely numb.
Just think about it for a second. That hobby you used to be obsessed with, or that song that always made you feel something, or even just hanging out with your friends. Why is it that sometimes the spark just feels gone? That's the big question we're going to unpack right now.
So first up, let's put a name to this. We'll call it the empty feeling. You know what I'm talking about. It's that sense of inner flatness. The highs aren't really high, the lows aren't that low. You're just sort of there.
And the most important thing to get right off the bat is that if you feel this way, you're not alone. Not at all. This is a super common experience, especially in the world we live in today. But here's the key. It's not some kind of personal failure. It's actually a biological response. Your brain is trying to protect you.
Okay, so where does this feeling even come from? Well, a lot of the time, the root cause isn't something broken inside of us. It's what's happening around us every single day. We're living in the era of the overstimulated brain, where too much has pretty much become the new normal.
I mean, it starts with the sheer amount of content, right? That endless scroll, the infinite feed. It's literally designed to never, ever end. There's always something else to watch, to read, to consume.
And then you've got the noise, not just actual noise, but the digital kind. The constant pings, the notifications, the buzzes. It's a nonstop barrage of alerts from like a dozen different apps. And what does all of this create? A massive dopamine overload. Every notification, every funny little video, it's a tiny chemical reward. But when you get those rewards constantly, our brain's whole reward system just gets fried.
It boils down to this. It's just too much everything. All at once, all the time. The simple truth is, our brains were not built to handle this level of constant input.
So what can your brain possibly do when it's faced with this relentless flood of information? Well, it does what any of us would do. It goes into a defensive mode. First, just like an overworked muscle, it just gets tired, exhausted. Then, to try and save some energy, it stops reacting so intensely to things. And finally, as a last resort, it just starts to shut down. It's a survival tactic, plain and simple.
And that shutdown, that's what leads us to this state of numbness. It's not really an active sadness. It's more of a passive lack of feeling, a quiet, empty space. This is that feeling of floating we were talking about. And the main consequence of your brain hitting the brakes like this is that your entire emotional range gets flattened. The peaks of joy don't feel quite so high anymore, but the valleys of sadness don't feel quite so deep either. Everything just kind of drifts towards this muted, neutral middle ground. This quote just nails it perfectly, doesn't it? We float, not happy, not sad, just numb. See, it's not about being unhappy. It's about being untethered from both happiness and sadness. You're just floating, existing in that weird in-between.
Now, there's a term for this that I think completely reframes the whole experience, and it's so important. It's called emotional burnout, and it's such a powerful way to understand what's really happening inside. And here is the absolute game changer. While it feels like a lack of emotions, it's actually the result of being completely overwhelmed by them. Think about that. It's not an absence of feeling at all. It's the exhaustion of feeling, a true burnout.
So that brings us to what might be the most powerful reframe of this whole thing. And once you really get this, it can completely change how you see this whole experience.
So let's redefine what numbness actually is. It's not a void. It isn't emptiness. Numbness is simply the exhaustion that comes from feeling too much for way too long.
So if there's one thing you take away from this, let it be this. Numbness isn't the absence of feeling. It's the exhaustion of feeling too much. It's your body's way of screaming that it needs a break. Which means the real question isn't how do I start feeling again, but maybe it's how can I give myself the quiet space I so clearly need to recover.